What up, YouTube? It's your boy Banks, and we back in the building. You feel me? It's True Talks, cause True Talks. All right, let's get straight right into it. So you already know Game 1 happened on Saturday for the Raptors. It was the Raptors and the Sixers, and bruh, I know a lot of y'all are gonna overreact to the Philly winning, and especially that fact that it was a blowout. But again, you can't just look at results, man. That's what happens in basketball a lot of times with fans and stuff like that. They look at things and they look at things with hindsight. They look at things kind of like with just a different eye, where it's kind of like, oh my God, this is what happened, this, and we told you Philly's gonna slap them and this, that, and the third. Let's really dissect what actually happened, because it's not a matter of, you know what I'm saying? It's not a matter of just looking at the results and looking at a 131-111 win and that, okay, the Raptors are fugazi, this, that, and the third. Now, again, context is going to be different because Scottie got injured, and it's definitely unfortunate. This was a worst case scenario for the Raptors, getting blown out and losing, Scottie, and then now Trent has non-COVID illness, and then Thad Young again with an injury. So this was the worst case scenario. 3 bodies get just get depleted just off one game, right? Obviously, you don't ever want to see that. And it's kind of like, okay, this is fugazi. What's going to transpire moving forward? Like, Scottie is a huge part of the Raptors. It's the same thing like Draymond to the Warriors, where, he play makes, he goes into, and he's more aggressive than Draymond. So it's 2.0 version. So, his defense might not be to the same level as Draymond, but there's certain defense differences. Like, Draymond's not going to guard Harden out the gate and stuff like that. He more so plays a big man version of the defense, where Scottie can play big man version and also play like a perimeter version of the defense, right? Where it's more so like a Kawhi, where I'm going to guard Harden, shut him out the gate. You know what I mean? We're going to switch everything, but I'm on him. I'm playing him half court beyond, stuff like that. So, and then playmaking and taking advantage of certain like green on him and certain mismatches, like he's aggressive. So Scottie does a lot for the Raptors, right? That where it's like you miss him if he's not there. But then there's a whole nother side of that if he's out, maybe Pascal has more paint room to work with, where he can now go to where he's at, where he goes to like high 20s, 30s and stuff like that. So there's certain things you're going to miss of him, but the Raptors have great team defense. This is why when Scottie's even out in regular season play, they could still win. Same thing when Pascal's out. They could still win with certain guys out because of the team personnel and the blueprint of the team. No matter, they have defenders galore. They have length, tall perimeter guys galore. So like, they could adjust and change it. OG can now just go on Harden. Like, it's not too much where it's like, okay, the Raptors can't win the series no more. It affects them. You might add one more game, or now they might have to be more flawless and stuff like that, hit their shots, whatever. But it's not off the table, whereas like, let's say another team had a guy like this go out, it's over, right? If the Warriors had Draymond go out, it's over, right? So you have to understand just the personnel and just the team in itself. But again, it's worst case scenario for the Raptors. Why? Because not just by the results, but because of what happened. What happened was the Raptors forced the others to score. And when you look at it, Tobias Harris 9 for 14, Maxey 14 for 21, Niang 3 for 4, Thibault 1 for 1, Shake Milton 3 for 4. Everybody other than Danny Green, that went 1 for 6, shot hella efficient and snapped, right? And that's not a blueprint for the Sixers' success. Normally, it's they struggle. So the Raptors' game plan was make Harden and Embiid struggle. We pad those guys and let everybody else try to go off. That's why the Raptors have won 3 out of the 4 games versus the Sixers in this series. But the worst case scenario happened where, it happens sometimes in the playoffs where your game plan is they're not going to beat us if this happens. If we do this, they're not going to beat us. Their other guys can't, that's what the game, you put that on the board going in. And this is, if we lock up these guys can't beat us and they can't do X, Y, and Z. And trust me. And then finally, the game plan you do, they actually beat you. But everything you said won't happen actually just happens in that game. Does that mean that you actually were wrong? Does that mean that the game plan was wrong? Does that mean that you overreact? No. Because the IQ going into that is, when you look at it, if they were to play 10 games, 8 out of the 10 games, Harden and Embiid if they struggle, they're going to lose those games. Rarely are you going to see Tobias Harris snap like this, Maxey snap like this, especially without involving Harden and Embiid, because it's not like Like some of it, yes, Harden, Harden still had his, what did he have? He still had his 14 assists because, again, he's doing the that, and he just passed out late, and mans are hitting closed out shots and contested shots and somewhat, and they're just hitting it. Normally, they don't hit those under the rest shots, right? That's why they've been on a losing streak and not losing it or losing to the Raptors those last two games right before the playoffs, right? That's the context, too. They played each other right before this, which just doesn't happen often. Most times, you have to go back to a matchup that happened in March, or a matchup, not even March, a matchup that happened in February, a matchup that happened in January. That was the last time we played, or the last time we were healthy, right? Because we played in March, but we rested guys. Like, stuff like that normally happens, but they played full strength for the last two games, which were hella recent. Literally, like, in your last 5 games, you played each other of the season, and then, like, your last 10 games, they played each other, like, twice. So, like, it literally was playoff atmosphere both those games, and Raptors won both those games. So when you look at it from that perspective, the blueprint that won them those games was this blueprint. So why would we change it? And you can't overreact to Maxey. Like, Maxey's a hooper. So Maxey, if he consistently does this, which is very capable, this is why I said Raptors won't likely win in 5. I do see 6 because, again, Maxey could win you 2 games. I don't see Harden. Like, Harden had 22, but majority free throws, 6 for 7. He was 6 for 17, horrendous shooting. Embiid, 5 for 15, horrendous shooting. Both of them 9, 8, 6 free throws. You minus that, you minus the free throws, Embiid has 10 points. You minus the free throws, Harden has 16 points. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, do we really, like, he shot efficient from 3, 4 for 7. But for the most part, he's still 6 for 17. You know what I mean? He's played, like, this was actually a better game for Harden. And even though when you look at it in comparison to regular season Harden, this is atrocious. But it is a better game for Harden because we know what playoff Harden really is. He normally goes 6 for 22. He doesn't even get 6, maybe 3 for 18. Like, he doesn't even get 22 points. But this is up Harden's alleyway. Like, he didn't play great. He didn't play horrendous, but he played like below decent, if I have to add it. Because now you add the assist and you add these other things, I don't think people are going to look at it as like, oh my God, Harden did elite. I don't look at it as like Harden did elite because he didn't just drive to the paint and just get man's wide open looks. For the most part, it was like they were hitting late closeout looks. He was stepping back and then he just did he just did the late pass out shit and then man's just hit it. It wasn't like, you know what I mean? And then for the most part too, other than that, what was more so a thing that Nurse has to adjust, because I don't think Nurse has to adjust anything other than maybe not double Embiid as much in certain scenarios, kind of like stunt and go back, or just not foul as much. But other than that, even then, I don't like 19 points, 15 rebounds. Like, even if they do the exact same foul in him, it is what it is. It's not enough to like win and enough for him to have 30. The difference in this game, for the most part, if you look at it, even just out the gate in the first quarter and where the Raptors kind of were at, in a deficient and just under the radar and kind of like having to come uphill and battle uphill for the rest of the game, was more so out the gate. The Sixers had a mission to increase the tempo. They learned from the Raptors forcing the Sixers to half court, where Harden and Embiid struggling is going to dictate, and now late shot clock and stuff like that. They weren't shooting late in the clock, stuff like that. Everything was up tempo. Even though Harden was one-on-one, he'll pass it faster, and they were shooting up tempo. And even off the rebound, Maxey's running downhill. Like, to start out the game, Maxey was just pushing the tempo, shooting threes in transition, getting to the cup in transition, dunking in transition. Same thing for Tobias Harris. Like, the whole team just pushed in transition. That normally is not how the Sixers play. They don't play like that. They don't play like that. A lot of it is half court, Embiid Harden. Half court, Embiid Harden. So now when they struggle on the half court, it hurts them more. And then now the Raptors get the transition play. So the Raptors were actually pushing transition too, even off the scores. They push early shots in the clock, stuff like that. And the Raptors were scoring. But it was a moot point because the Sixers were pushing in transition as well and actually shooting well. So that's something that the Raptors have to adjust and actually get back on transit. Like, once you don't even go for offensive rebounds that much. Maybe one guy who's battling with Embiid, but for the most part, everyone else get back, focus on transition defense, and force them to go back into half court. Both teams are kind of implementing the same logic where it's like, you guys aren't good in transition defense, let's push on them. Sixers aren't good in transition defense, push on them. And both of it worked. So then now, that's why it canceled out And then the fact that the Sixers are hitting shots now, that's where you got the lead to drastically go. They're getting more, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So that's where Nurse has to more probably adjust that for the most part. Other than that, like, the blueprint was perfect. How can you win 4 games with Maxey doing this and Tobias doing this and everybody else shooting this efficient, the others, with Harden and Embiid struggling? No. At some point, Harden and Embiid are going to have to go off. So for the most part, this was the perfect blueprint. I don't think you changed much. I still think the Raptors could still win this series even with Scottie ailing. Trent will come back because it's just an illness situation. I don't know. He might be. I don't know if he's playing today. We don't know. But they assume that all 3 of them were out in Thaddeus, Scottie, and Gary Trent. That's tough. It's going to be tough, but other guys will get more minutes. And I think just the blueprint that Nurse applies, I just think, especially, when you look at it shooting-wise, like, the Raptors shot 48% from the field, 40% from 3, 82%. Like, that is a great game in terms of offense. But then the Sixers shot 51% from the field, 50% from 3, 85% from the free throw line as a team. Like, that's hella efficient. That is not up the Sixers alleyway. Like, you know what I mean? Pascal went 9 for 18. OG went 9 for 15. Barnes 4 for 6. VanVleet 4 for 12. Only one who shot bad was Trent 2 for 11. Boucher 3 for 3. Everybody shot efficient. So for the most part, like, this is not you don't overreact if you're a Raptors fan. You don't overreact to this. Don't let mans, the one thing that I will say for the Raptors that I said was going to be a weakness is they're going to have a lot of droughts of not scoring because their one-on-one bucket getters in the half court is hard. And that's why I'm like, versus any other team, especially like they face the Celtics, they face the Nets, they face whoever they were to face who actually has bucket getters. That's why I would say Raptors are losing in 5 because they just don't have bucket getters. But versus Sixers, their bucket getters are actually they don't move like bucket getters in the playoffs. You can kind of make them struggle. That's why the Raptors, their non-bucket getters won't affect them as much as it would versus other teams that have that. You get what I'm saying? And that's why, like, even if the Raptors were to face the Bucks, so they might struggle even maybe more. Or, or stuff like that. Or they were to face, because they have Middleton, they have Drew. Stuff like that. And then Giannis is going to get his guaranteed in the paint. Like other teams that they face, it might be a struggle in terms of just because they have bucket getters, but like Celtics, they'll struggle as well too. But the Sixers in itself, yes, they have bucket getters, 2 one-on-one guys. But like I said, the Raptors defense cancels those guys to the magnitude that they would actually be at, which is why now the Raptors could put in transition and the way they play might not be more so ailing, even though they'll have droughts of scoring, which is why I said they'll lose 2 games due to that. But I still think they could win 4, because of the Sixers deficiencies and mishaps that they have with this chemistry in terms of play style wise, etc. And then the others don't really go off at like that because they're forced to have court and it's just a different game. Like they scored 131. They were high. They didn't feel like a playoff game in terms of the up-tempo play. It felt like regular season basketball and up-tempo play. So if Nurse just cancels that, then you'll see a whole different Sixers team because in the half court, they're going to have to go through Harden and Embiid, late clock shots, stuff like that. The others aren't getting involved, and now they're getting late under duress, closeout shots. It's not the same as opposed to the up-tempo play makes the others benefit so drastically in terms of the Sixers. So, for the most part, that's kind of what was transpiring. If you actually dissect that, you can kind of see that, okay, you know what? Raptors aren't in a terrible position. They're not at all. You know what I'm saying? The only reason why it might be more terrible position and where I could see more panic is the Scottie injury, right? But I'm not going to panic fully yet in terms of the Scottie injury just because of, like I said, the personnel, the blueprint, and the team principles that the Raptors have implemented. It still could make the Sixers clash. And that's what you have to understand. So, this game literally, if anything, more so made me more confident in what I said would transpire. I didn't expect the Sixers to just go transition like that. So, like, you know what I mean? The predictions I gave kind of are still at hand, are still, able to, come to fruition. But again, if you make Harden and Embiid struggle, you increase your chances. And that's all the Raptors have to focus on. Don't overreact. Don't overchange things. Don't do that. Just change your transition defense and keep the same blueprint. And I promise you, maybe a little bit less fouling. But even then, I promise you, it's more so Raptors going to be in a better position. Now, before we finish this, Pascal, even though he was 9 for 18, I did like the aggression. He did hit some step back shots and he did take them. But there are certain moments where now they started going on a run where Pascal started to be more tentative, more passive, even in mismatch scenarios and stuff like that. But I didn't think he played a terrible, terrible game. I think, obviously, if you just look at the box score, you could say that he played good and he was fantastic. I don't think he was fantastic. I think he was decent. But again, it's just he became more passive in certain scenarios, certain moments and stuff like that I didn't like. But for the most part, he did play pretty good. He wasn't like hella nervous, like out the gate. Like you seen him take shots, step back shots, stuff like that early, right in the middies. So, this wasn't this was more so a positive game for Pascal more than a negative, even though he still had negatives within the game. But that happens. But for what the Pascal we normally are used to seeing, like this gives you more, just more confidence that like, okay, you know what? Even with Scottie ailing and Scottie, out the game, Pascal might just go into that confidence, just increase his bag and, because he did when he had Embiid on him, just run a pick, switch, and Tobias is on me now. Like he did have mismatches. He did have favorable scenarios. It wasn't like, he would just pat it throughout. There was times where he shouldn't have passed out and he just would pass out. And it's not like a playmaking pass out. It's more so just like, I don't feel this pass out. So, you know what I mean? I don't like those. Those are the pass outs I hate. But, other than that, I still just think that he gave you signs where, okay, you could see him being more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive, and there's just still that whole, like, OG needs to be more in his bag. Trent, obviously, when he's there, has to be in his bag and stuff like that. But for the most part, like, they're going to have droughts again offensively in the half court, and that's something that will never change, right? But for the most part, again, if they get more stops, let's say the others shoot worse and they're still locking up harder than Embiid, that is not the fact that they just lock those guys up defensively. It's the fact that now you get long rebounds and now they push in transition, which means more points for the Raptors. Like, that's what people don't understand. That's why the Raptors weren't as able to go in transition as much as they would like to, because of the shots that the Sixers were hitting in terms of the others. So if they're now missing those, Raptors are pushing the tempo, and the Sixers don't have great transition defense. Their transition defense is makes. That's the way of having great transition defense. So, I just think that I don't think this game was, indicative to how the series is going to play out. I think it was just a game one. Raptors don't even do great in game ones. You know what I'm saying? Especially now on the road. They don't do great in game one. So, for the most part, we'll see how this transpires. I still think be confident in the Raptors. I'm confident in Nurse. Even with Scottie injury, I just think that, there's more to play. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. It's True Talks. It's True Talk. Share, like, and subscribe. We out here. There's no doubt here. There's no drought here. You feel me? I appreciate y'all. You already know. Spread the word. You already know, man. Click that notification button so you know when I'm here. Because I'm here. You feel me? I appreciate y'all. So what LA looks like, man. It's playoff basketball. I still think it's going to go 6 or 7 regardless. So we'll see how that transpires. Even though Scottie is injured, I still think it'll go 6 or 7. But Scottie's injury could make it now. Sixers just dominating, going 5. You never know, right? But I still think Nurse's game plan, his exotic defenses that he runs, like Katie said, like stuff like that. I just think that, Embiid Harden's going to struggle for the whole series. I just think that. That's why I had the Raptors in 6, because I don't think the others are going to just shoot like this and kill every time. 2 games, yeah. But for 4 games, nah. And even if they do for 4 games, there's going to be 3 of the games that they don't. Like, then that means it's a 7-game series. Like, you know what I mean? They're not just going to 4 games straight. Like, come on now. Anyways, you already know. I appreciate y'all. And I'm out, man.